I've made numerous different videos regarding gacha game communities, regarding how they impact the game itself and the new player experience. As such, I've gotten to interact with a variety of different communities and a variety of different games, and as a direct result of that, I want to take the time out of my day today to speak and discuss the nature of gacha communities and how heavily they can impact a player's experience and a game as a whole. So without further ado, if you find yourself enjoying this, consider leaving a like and subscribing, and let's move on to gacha. Now, this is going to be contrary to my previous video in which I discussed the general impact of a game's success and failure based on the size of its community and the type of community that it gains. That video solely focused on the perception of a gacha game based on the community and how that can impact the success and failure of a game depending on the dedication of the people who play it. Instead, I wanted to discuss different communities that I personally have interacted with and how heavily they can impact the experience that I've ultimately had. I will also be mentioning other gacha games that I have not directly covered on this channel, or at least haven't given as much coverage as I have to others. I want to clarify is that this is just based on my own personal experiences and the opinions of other individuals who I've asked here and there. Therefore, this is not indicative of what your experience may be like and what experiences you've had. You can personally have a great interaction with a different community than I have, and as a result, your opinion may be entirely different. But please do keep that in mind going forward. One of the more common aspects of gacha games that I see, and that you may yourself have seen if you interact with different gacha communities or play a variety of games, is that certain times communities dislike or hate one another. Now, I have mentioned beforehand that I ultimately don't care what games you play as long as you're having fun, and I think that should be the general perception we all have. The same goes for people who play for waifu versus meta. I think both sides are wonderful. But I do think that the interactions between communities do affect the outside perception of different games. Whether you play a popular gacha game or an unpopular and lesser known one doesn't matter. Instead, what is more impactful and what is felt and noticed more is how that community chooses to interact with both the public side of the company, whether that be their Twitter profile or subreddit or anything else, and how that community chooses to interact with another community. An example is the Arknights and Genshin Impact community. Among gacha games, these are two of the most well-known ones, and the communities very publicly don't get along too often. As a result of the interactions these communities have had with one another, individuals who maybe don't play one gacha or maybe don't play either one of them may look at and see these communities being negative or being in some way, shape, or form mean to one another, and subsequently may associate that negativity with the game itself, and as a direct result, it can deter individuals from playing it. On the contrary, if an individual's community is extremely wholesome and extremely nice and welcoming, it can dramatically change the perception individuals will have. Hypothetically speaking, if you were to have played Blue Archive, and in the event that you were extremely confused but went to either the official subreddit or the official Discord server or joined other Discord servers such as my own, link down below, and you had a positive experience, you may be more inclined to not only keep and stay with the game long term, but also more inclined to recommend it to your friends. Now, this is regardless of the game's actual context, because let's be honest, the Blue Archive isn't the most sociable game. I don't think many individuals are out here screaming that they play Blue Archive at the top of their lungs. However, positive experiences with communities can dramatically change the likelihood that individuals are going to recommend it to their friends, going to bring more individuals, and this ultimately does bring more revenue for the game itself and possibly a larger player base. Which is why I think it's incredibly important to not only consider the new player experience, but also consider how individuals interact with other people in that game space. 9 times out of 10, unless somebody explicitly informs you that they are a new player, you are very unlikely to know if they're just starting out in the game or are a veteran. And as such, your individual interactions with that person may dramatically alter their own perception of the game that they're playing. If an individual has repeated negative interactions with the game's community, they are less inclined to play that long term, less inclined to recommend it to their friends because they're more than likely going to associate and expect their friend will then have a negative experience as well, and less likely to play it long term, mostly because individuals who choose to play gachas for an extremely long period of time are on some level driven by the community itself. You want to improve because you see your other friends improving. You want to get better because you want to see and learn more about the game that you're enjoying. But if you have nobody to share that enjoyment with, you very likely aren't going to continue and stay with that game long term. That's why so many individuals may pick up a gacha game but leave it at the end of the day. Maybe they give it a week, maybe they give it a day. The community a game has is incredibly important to its long-term success, and I don't think that can be understated. Despite all my interactions with communities, I won't say which ones I think are the best and which ones I think are the worst, because let's be honest, I haven't exactly equally covered these games on my channel, And I think it's unfair to say that, because if you're an individual who's watching this video and maybe you aren't interested in a lot of the gachas that I have covered, Blue Archive, Genshin Impact, Nikke, and Arknights, I don't want to deter you from interacting with that game's community by saying this one's bad or this one's extremely good, because my perceptions are just that, my own perceptions and my own experiences. But hypothetically, if you were to interact with many different gacha communities, then I would personally recommend the subreddit itself, because in most cases, the subreddit for a game is likely to be the most welcoming area for it. I do not recommend looking at it with reroll or tier lists early on, because if you do continuously reroll in a gacha, it may stifle your enjoyment long term because you're spending so much time trying to get to a perfect account. And if you're able to, I also recommend not necessarily seeking out the opinions of other individuals. Most of the time opinions will be positive, but there is a very high chance you may find individuals who dislike the game that they're playing, or who may overwhelm you with a lot of information to an extent to where you feel deterred from learning again. Taking a game at your own pace and learning as you go is incredibly important, and I recommend it to a lot of individuals because part of the fun of a gacha game is learning how to play it. Even if you do get frustrated, I mean, my channel is based a lot around the frustration in certain gachas. And if you're a veteran player attempting to get more people into your game, I recommend holding back a lot of information. If you toss too much information to somebody, like I said previously, you may overwhelm them. And do expect a lot of new players to make a lot of mistakes early on. Putting them or pushing them towards the meta of a current game isn't exactly the best case scenario, because depending on the game that they're playing or depending on who they are, they may not enjoy that aspect. Instead, I would recommend telling them to roll for who they want and then briefly explaining the character if you have the knowledge. And maybe you're not the best teacher, then that's perfectly fine, but do understand that at the very least interacting with newer players and giving them a positive experience overall can invite them to come back to the community, if not play the game more. Even if they do decide to drop the game, they may still continue to interact with that, and at the end of the day, I think it's more important to have positive interactions with everybody rather than continuously try to drag people to play your game. And I would also recommend withholding negative thoughts or opinions about the game itself. The more positive experiences that I've had with gachas, and the gachas that I've stuck with the longest, have given me very positive perceptions as a new player. If I wasn't necessarily guided early on, I learned a lot of new concepts myself. But if you have a negative opinion of a game, and especially if you choose to talk about that or focus on it too much, you can dramatically deter somebody from playing with it long term because it ruins their experience at first. Getting into a game is always fun, but seeing veteran players talk about how much they dislike a feature or dislike a part of the game or dislike the game in general can be a bit disheartening. And I do want to clarify, criticism of a game is one thing, but just having outright negative opinions or hating a game is another. And whilst the line between them is very thin, it is important to recognize if what you're saying is criticism or what you're saying is just you being negative. I would also like to say it's very important to have different opinions, and if you do have a different opinion, that's fine, not just with me, but with each other, so long as you can express those different opinions without outright yelling at each other. And finally, whether you come from Genshin Impact, Arknights, Blue Archive, Artery Fusion, Counterside, Nikke, or Tower of Fantasy, all these gachas are great games, and ultimately they're all equal to different degrees. I just hope whatever gacha you're playing, you're having a good time, and if you aren't, be sure to try some others. I will cover them on the channel here, and maybe you see one you like already. My name's been Anaki, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, leave a like, consider subscribing, and I do hope to see you next time. Good luck on your pulls!